Following contains elements including descriptions of sexual and psychological abuse that some may find disturbing. Please proceed with caution and protect yourself appropriately. Thanks for watching. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Crime in Court. Today, I wanted to bring you a deep dive into an important and heavy topic: the horrific allegations of abuse within the iconic boy band Menudo, specifically regarding teen heartthrob Roy Rossello, a former Menudo member who has filed a lawsuit against the band's founder, Edgardo Diaz, in the Southern District of New York. We're going to break down Roy's complaint, read some key excerpts, as well as the whole complaint, and explore how the case connects to one of the most infamous true crime stories of all time, the Menendez brothers case. Roy's is a story of courage, trauma, and a fight for justice. So let's get started, and please don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Introduction and background. Let's start with some background. Roy Stephen Rossello Diaz, born May 1st, 1970, in Puerto Rico, joined Menudo in 1983 at just 13 years old. Menudo, for those who don't know, was a Puerto Rican boy band formed in 1977 by producer Edgardo Diaz. It became a global sensation in the 1980s, launching stars like Ricky Martin and selling out concerts worldwide. The band had a unique model. Members were replaced once they turned 16, keeping the group perpetually young. Roy was a member of the band from 1983 to 1986, performing on shows like The Love Boat, Solid Gold, and even presenting at the 1984 Grammys. But behind the glitz and glamour, there were dark rumors. Over the years, former Menudo members, including Roy, alleged that Edgardo Diaz, the band's creator and manager, subjected them to physical, emotional, and sexual abuse. These allegations first surfaced publicly in 1991 when former member Ralphie Rodriguez accused Diaz of abuse, but no charges were filed at the time. Diaz has consistently denied all allegations, and for decades, the claims were overshadowed by Menudo's massive success. Roy's story took a dramatic turn in 2014 when he appeared on a Brazilian reality show and publicly accused Diaz of sexually assaulting him during his time in Menudo. This was a bold move, but it didn't immediately lead to legal action. Roy, now 54 and living in Brazil where he runs a Caribbean themed bar and jewelry store, decided to focus on healing and rebuilding his life. That brings us to 2023 when Roy's allegations gained new attention through the Peacock docuseries Menendez plus Menudo: Boys Betrayed. In this series, Roy not only reiterated his claims against Diaz but also made a bombshell accusation. He said he was sexually abused by Jose Menendez, the father of the Menendez brothers, when he was just 14. This revelation tied Roy's story to one of the most notorious murder cases in American history. Timeline of events. Now let's walk through the key events in chronological order to understand Roy's journey and how we got to this lawsuit. 1977, Edgardo Diaz forms Menudo in Puerto Rico. The band quickly rises to fame, becoming a cultural phenomenon with a revolving door of young teenage members. 1983. Roy Rossello, age 13, joins Menudo. He's thrust into a whirlwind of performances, TV appearances, and international tours. According to Roy, This is also when the alleged abuse by Edgardo Diaz begins. In the 2023 docuseries, Roy claims that Diaz sexually assaulted him repeatedly over his 3 years in the band, including a horrific incident at the Biltmore Hotel in Los Angeles where Diaz allegedly tied him to a bed, beat him, and raped him. 1983 to 1984. Roy alleges that Diaz took him to the New Jersey home of Jose Menendez, an RCA Records executive who signed Menudo to a multi-million-dollar contract. Roy says he was given wine, felt disoriented, and was raped by Jose Menendez. He woke up in pain in a New York hotel room, bleeding and unable to move for days. This incident, Roy claims, was facilitated by Diaz as part of Menudo's business dealings with RCA. 1986. Roy leaves Menudo at age 16 as per the band's age out policy. He struggles with depression and the trauma of the alleged abuse, which he says he kept secret to protect his family, who benefited financially from his Menudo earnings. 1991, former Menudo member Ralphie Rodriguez accuses Diaz of sexual abuse, marking the first public allegations against him. Photojournalist Bolivar Arellano also tries to expose Diaz on a Puerto Rican talk show, but he faces defamation charges and is silenced. No criminal charges are filed against Diaz. 2014, Roy goes public with his allegations against Diaz on a Brazilian reality show, breaking his silence after nearly 3 decades. This garners attention but doesn't immediately lead to legal action. 2021, former Menudo member Ray Reyes, who died of a heart attack, had reportedly planned to speak out against Diaz. His brother Raul shares audio of Ray calling Diaz a sick pedophile. This adds to the growing chorus of allegations. In 2022, the HBO Max docuseries Menudo, Forever Young features 13 former Menudo members accusing Diaz of various forms of abuse. Roy's story is not the focus, but the series amplifies the band's dark history. 2023. The Peacock docuseries Menendez plus Menudo Boys Betrayed airs, with Roy as a central figure. He details his abuse by Diaz and Jose Menendez, connecting his story to the Menendez brothers' case. The Los Angeles Police Department airs an investigation into Diaz based on Roy's allegations of an assault at the Biltmore Hotel in the 1980s. This is the first known criminal investigation into Diaz. May 2024, Roy files a civil lawsuit against Edgardo Diaz in the Southern District of New York, alleging sexual assault, emotional manipulation, and trafficking from 1983 to 1986 across multiple locations, including the U.S., Puerto Rico, and Brazil. The complaint, which we'll read shortly, seeks damages for the trauma that Ray endured. Connection to the Menendez brothers' case. Now, let's talk about how Roy's allegations tie to the Menendez brothers' case. For those unfamiliar, Lyle and Eric Menendez were convicted in 1996 for the 89 murders of their parents, Jose and Kitty Menendez, in their Beverly Hills home. During their trials, the brothers claimed that they took their parents' lives out of fear after years of sexual and physical abuse by Jose, with Kitty failing to intervene, not to mention participating in the abuse. The jury, in their second trial, where abuse evidence was extremely limited, rejected this defense and sentenced them to life without parole. Roy's 2023 allegations in Menendez plus Menudo Boys Betrayed added a new layer to the brothers' story. He claimed that Jose Menendez, an RCA executive who worked closely with Menudo, raped him in 1983 or 1984. This corroborated the brothers' claims of the father's abusive behavior, suggesting Jose had a pattern of targeting young boys. Eric Menendez in the docuseries recalled seeing Roy at their home and noted his father often met with Menudo members alone. Lyle Menendez said Roy's allegations were meaningful and could have made a difference at trial. In 2023, the Menendez brothers filed a habeas corpus petition citing Roy's allegations and a newly discovered 1988 letter from Eric to his cousin Andy Cano detailing the ongoing abuse by Jose. Their habeas petition argues that the new evidence could have swayed a jury toward a manslaughter conviction, potentially leading to their release after serving significantly less time than they've already served. Former Los Angeles DA George Gascon supported reviewing the case, but in February 2025, newly elected DA Nathan Hochman opposed resentencing, arguing that Roy's allegations don't prove self defense in the homicides. Roy's courage in coming forward has reignited public and legal interest in the Menendez case, highlighting how abuse can drive extreme actions. His story also underscores the broader issue of exploitation in the entertainment industry. Reading the complaint. Let's dive into the complaint itself, filed in May 2024 in the Southern District of New York. The case is Roy Rossello versus Edgardo Diaz Melendez. That's Melendez with an L. The complaint alleges that from 1983 to 1986, Edgardo Diaz subjected Roy, who was then a minor, to repeated sexual assaults, emotional manipulation, and trafficking. It claims Diaz exploited Roy's youth and his family's financial struggles to coerce him into compliance. The abuse allegedly occurred in multiple locations, including the U.S., Puerto Rico, and Brazil, during Menudo's tours and business dealings. The lawsuit also details an incident in which Diaz brought Rossello to the home of Jose Menendez, where he was drugged and raped by Jose. Roy seeks unspecified damages for the physical and psychological harm that he suffered. It's definitely some heavy reading. It paints a picture of a young boy trapped in a system that prioritized profit over his safety and well being. Roy's lawsuit is about holding Diaz accountable and seeking justice for the trauma that's haunted him for decades. Up next, we will be reading Rossello's 17-page complaint in its entirety. You can skip forward using the timestamps in the descriptions below. Roy Rossello versus Edgardo Diaz Melendez. Complaint. Plaintiff Roy Rossello, by and through his undersigned counsel, Edwards Henderson, files this complaint against Edgardo Diaz Melendez and alleges as follows. Introduction. In 1977, Edgardo Diaz Melendez forever changed the music industry by creating the famous Latin boy band Menudo. Shortly after formation, Menudo took the world by storm, gaining global popularity. Even today, Menudo is still referred to as one of the most popular boy bands of all time by publications including Billboard, Us Weekly, Seventeen, and Teen Vogue. Since Menudo's inception in 1977, Diaz systemically sexually battered, sexually trafficked, and committed acts of gender-motivated violence against many of Menudo's members, including Roy Rossello. Roy Rossello was a member of Menudo during the Golden Era, which included Robbie Rosa, Ray Reyes, Roy Rossello, and Ricky Martin, who are all pictured together below or on the screen. Once Diaz had his grasp on Roy Rossello, he regularly engaged in heinous and despicable crimes of sexual violence against him, regularly reminding Rossello that no one would ever believe him if he attempted to come forward, and that doing so would be detrimental to the livelihood and future of Rossello's family. Diaz sexually assaulted Rossello all over the world from August 1983 through December 1986, including in Arizona, California, Florida, Hawaii, Illinois, Louisiana, Massachusetts, Nevada, New Jersey, New Mexico, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, South Carolina, Texas, Puerto Rico, Guam, the Bahamas, and in various parts of South America from the time that he was 14 to 16 years old. Edgardo Diaz was such an insidious sexual predator that despite having been born on May 1st, 1969, Diaz had Roy Rossello's birthday publicly recorded as May 1st, 1970, so that his age would appear to be 1 year younger, and he would remain a Menudo member at Diaz's disposal even longer. Jurisdiction, venue, and timeliness. This court has jurisdiction over the dispute pursuant to 28 U.S.C. 1332, diversity jurisdiction, as plaintiff and defendant are citizens of different states and/or jurisdictions, and the amount in controversy exceeds $75,000, exclusive of interests and costs. This court has personal jurisdiction over the defendant as a substantial part of the acts, events, and omissions giving rise to the cause of action occurred in the Southern District of New York. Venue is proper in this court as the cause of action arose within the jurisdiction of this court. This action has been timely filed pursuant to the applicable law governing the Victims of Gender-Motivated Violence Protection Law, New York City, Admin Code 10-1101-1107. Parties. Plaintiff Roy Rossello is currently a resident of the state of Florida. At all times material, Edgardo Diaz Melendez was a citizen of the United States and a resident of Puerto Rico. Diaz was a man of extraordinary wealth who traveled across the United States regularly, including in New York, within the Southern District of New York. So, New York, New York. At all times material to the cause of action, defendant Edgardo Diaz Melendez was an adult male born in 1947. Factual background. Between 1977 and 1997, Menudo was synonymous with Latin pop culture, releasing 32 studio albums, selling millions of records, receiving Grammy nominations, in addition to a host of other awards, and partaking in television and movie productions. In the early 1970s, Diaz's mother organized trips to Spain for Puerto Rican students, which Diaz would often attend. At the time, Spain was at the epicenter of pop culture and music. While there, Diaz discovered a group of child performers known as La Pandilla. Diaz recognized the potential of the group and began to manage the band. La Pandilla was incredibly popular for years, and Diaz greatly profited from the band's success. As the band members went through puberty, their voices, bodies, and faces changed, which caused their popularity to decline. Recognizing that youth garners success in the music industry, Diaz created Menudo with the idea that once the members reached a certain age, usually between 15 and 18 years old, they would be replaced with a new, younger member. Throughout its 20 years, the band typically consisted of a five-member lineup who were often between 12 to 15 years old. There have been around 30 official members of Menudo over that time. While masquerading as a clever marketing idea, Diaz's scheme was nothing more than a brazen way to satiate his own predatory behavior. Diaz had a specific modus operandi as it related to his recruitment and abuse of Menudo members. He targeted and preyed upon young boys from poor communities where he would make promises of fame and fortune if they joined Menudo and followed his advice. Diaz presented Menudo members and their families with a contract and promised to look after the boys as if they were his own. Unbeknownst to the hopeful families, the Menudo members were signing their life and innocence away. Menudo quickly gained popularity in Puerto Rico from participating in radio advertisements and performing live shows across the island. With each live show, their popularity skyrocketed, prompting Diaz to attempt to over sexualize the band of young boys. He began forcing the members of Menudo to wear extremely tight clothing during the shows, believing that teenage girls would become enamored with the band. Further capitalizing on the marketability of Menudo, Diaz got the band their own television show. Fans were constantly lined up outside Menudo's headquarters, and by the early 1980s, the band was touring all across South America. Menudo had become an international brand, selling movies, records, clothing, toys, and other Menudo merchandise through a company owned by Diaz called Pedosa. Pedosa had a physical location in Puerto Rico that served as the location where Menudo would record music, make appearances, and spend time. By 1982, it was reported that Pedosa had earned $20 million in one year. In or around November 1983, Menudo signed a recording contract with RCA Records, presently Sony Records, that was worth roughly $30 million and required 12 albums be produced over a 6-year period. The deal was brokered between Diaz and RCA Division Executive Vice President Jose Menendez. Unlike any other band or musical act that RCA represented at the time, Menendez took a particularized interest in Menudo. While negotiating the deal, Diaz brought Rossello to Jose Menendez's home in New Jersey. While in the home, Rossello was brought upstairs and raped by Jose Menendez. Later, after the RCA sponsored performance at Radio City Music Hall that Rossello is pictured attending below, Jose Menendez drugged and violently raped Rossello in a New York City hotel room. Rossello had described the abuse by saying, "I was in terrible pain for a week. I could barely stand the pain. I couldn't even move." RCA knew that Menendez was infatuated with the band. Nonetheless, RCA authorized and paid for Menendez to travel around the world with the band and Diaz. As a result, Rossello was again violently raped by Jose Menendez while on tour with Menudo in Brazil. Diaz watched the rape occur. In addition to being a sexual abuser, Diaz would put the boys in other compromising positions to cover up his criminal behavior. For example, while on Menudo trips to the Caribbean, including to the Bahamas, Barbados, and Aruba, the boys were provided with large amounts of cash that they were told to hide through customs and return to Diaz in the country. In 1990, multiple members of Menudo resigned alleging abuse and mistreatment. By the end of 1990, Menudo was at the center of allegations regarding drug abuse and, more importantly, sexual abuse allegations against Diaz by former member Ralphie Rodriguez. In May 1991, Ralphie Rodriguez agreed to appear on Carmen Jovet's show. I have no idea how to say that. Carmen's talk show to shed light on the sexual abuse that Diaz carried out against Menudo members during his time with the band. Puerto Rican police arrived to shut the show down, presumably as a result of Diaz's close ties with the rich and powerful in Puerto Rico. Shortly thereafter, Diaz appeared on Christina, some other show on Univision, to deny all wrongdoing and suggest that the allegations by former Menudo members were motivated by money. During the same year, journalist and photographer Bolivar Arellano indicated on a Puerto Rican talk show that several members of Menudo had been drugged and sexually abused. Since then, other former Menudo band members and employees have spoken out against the sexually abusive crimes perpetrated against the band's members. In 2012, a former Menudo member's father, Ramon Acevedo, wrote a book called Dad, I Want to Be a Menudo, in which he raised allegations of sexual assault linked to Menudo. In 2014, former Menudo member Renee, I don't know how to say that, sorry, appeared on Telemundo show alleging that unfortunately there are many people in the communications world that really know what happened at Menudo and are playing stupid. In 2014, Rossello himself appeared on a Brazilian television program called A Fazenda 7, alleging that he had been victimized by Diaz. In response, Diaz released a statement that said, I am not going to spend the rest of my life defending myself and responding to allegations. You only have one life, and I live in peace. Former member Ray Reyes, who has tragically passed away, further made allegations of sexual abuse related to minor child Menudo members. In 2021, former Los Chamos member with ties to Menudo, Gabriel Fernandez, made similar allegations of abuse as a result of his affiliation with Menudo. In 2022, Angelo Garcia claimed that he was raped a series of times while performing with Menudo from 1988 to 1990. On November 8, 2022, Rossello filed a police report with the Los Angeles Police Department memorializing the horrific abuse that Rossello endured at the hands of Diaz within that jurisdiction. Diaz used Menudo to target his victims, including Rossello, on the basis of their gender. Diaz had a very specific modus operandi as it related to the recruitment and abuse of Menudo members. Diaz frequently targeted young boys who came from lower social classes in poor communities to become the next star of Menudo. Diaz would often make promises of fame, fortune, and money so long as the young boys promised to do as instructed by Diaz, including their submission to crimes of gender motivated violence. From managing La Pandilla, Diaz knew that parents could interfere with his complete autonomy over the band. For example, when Diaz managed La Pandilla, certain parents of the band members would not allow them to tour or perform during the school year. Recognizing this impediment to his perpetual abuse of Menudo members, Diaz forced Menudo members' parents to sign contracts essentially giving him parental authority over the young boys. In exchange, he promised the parents better lives for their sons and promised to look after them like his own. He provided them with housing, daily stipends, and tutors that were hired to travel with them as they toured the world. La Pandilla also included a female performer. However, when Diaz created Menudo, he specifically sought out, targeted, and preyed upon only minor male members for him to ultimately abuse, specifically on the basis of their gender. Throughout the band's existence, it has never had a female performer. When Diaz formed Menudo, he collectively paid the band members 70% of all proceeds and retained the remaining 30% for himself as a management fee. Once the original members were replaced, Diaz transitioned to paying the new band members an annual salary rather than a percentage of their earnings. Receiving nothing more than a few $1,000s a month, the next generations of band members were paid a pittance compared to the revenue that they generated for Diaz. Sadly, promises of a monthly salary worth thousands of dollars to incredibly poor young men and their families allowed Diaz to recruit countless children into the band to engage in sexual acts with them. Diaz's manipulation and promises of fame and fortune allowed him unfettered access to recruit young boys like Rossello into Menudo for him to commit crimes of gender motivated violence against them, and RCA allowed these vicious wolves to guard the henhouse. Consistent with Diaz's uniform pattern and practice, Roy Rossello was targeted and abused by Diaz. Rossello was born and raised in San Juan, Puerto Rico, where from a young age he attended a music school just blocks away from the Padosa headquarters. In 1983, at only 13 years old, Rossello and a friend went to Padosa headquarters to attend a sale on Menudo merchandise. When he entered the store, Rossello was immediately approached by fans of Menudo believing that he was a band member. Within minutes, Rossello was approached by an assistant employed by Diaz who informed him that Diaz would like to meet him. Diaz met Rossello and asked him if he was able to sing and dance. Rossello indicated that he was enrolled in the music school just a few blocks away and was a talented performer. Diaz was immediately enamored by Rossello. Within a week, Diaz arrived at Rossello's school and pulled him out of school for the day. Diaz had never met with Rossello's parents, nor did he have permission to remove the child from school, but Diaz maintained significant power in Puerto Rico at the time to do what he wanted. That same day, Diaz took Rossello to his home to discuss the possibility of joining Menudo. Diaz promised Rossello fame, fortune, and a lifestyle that he could only have dreamed of. The only caveat was that Rossello was told he must do everything that Diaz said, even if it included things that he might not like or want to do. That night, Diaz forced Rossello to sleep at the house with him and began to touch him inappropriately. Rossello, just 13 years old at the time, did not know what to do or how to escape. He was violently raped by Diaz for the first time that night. Following the rape, Diaz told Rossello that if he spoke out about what had happened, no one would believe him and his future would be ruined. Rossello lived with his parents and siblings in a very poor area of San Juan. He was the perfect target for Diaz. Shortly after Rossello's first interaction with Diaz, he appeared at Rossello's home to present him and his family with a contract to join Menudo. As soon as Diaz arrived, Rossello ran to his closet and hid inside, terrified of Diaz. Unaware of the rape, Rossello's mother believed that he was just nervous about the opportunity to join the band. Diaz presented Rossello and his family with a contract for him to join Menudo. Diaz offered to help them pay for their home, to provide them with a car, and to provide their family with the financial freedom they had never possessed before. Believing that Menudo would help his family escape poverty, Rossello signed the contract and became a member of Menudo in 1983. From 1983 to 1986, Diaz sexually abused and raped Rossello 3 to 4 times per week without reprieve all over the world. The band was touring almost every day, and at each stop, Rossello had strict instructions to appear at Diaz's hotel room to be subjected to various sexual abuses. When Rossello would defy Diaz by resisting or bringing girls around, Diaz would become physically abusive and violent towards Rossello. Diaz subjected Roy Rossello to crimes of gender motivated violence in this jurisdiction. Diaz raped Rossello each and every time that he was in New York City between 1983 and 1986. On January 24, 1984, when Rossello was 14 years old, he performed with Menudo in a taping of the Merv Griffin Show in New York City that aired on April 25, 1984. While staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. On February 15, 1984, Rossello performed with Menudo on David Copperfield's third television special, David Copperfield's Magic Underground, which was broadcast live from the Mark Hellinger Theater in New York City. While staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. On February 23, 1984, Menudo concluded its 10-show engagement at the Radio City Music Hall. Rossello was raped and subjected to crimes of gender motivated violence in New York City by Diaz each and every time that Rossello performed at Radio City Music Hall. In February 1984, Menudo became the official singing group for UNICEF, the United Nations Children's Organization. At the same time, RCA pledged 5 cents to UNICEF from the U.S. sale of each copy of Menudo's debut RCA album, A Toto Rock, and presented the U.S. Committee for UNICEF with a $12,500 initial check representing album sales of $250,000. On March 3, 1984, Rossello performed with Menudo on the American Bandstand show in New York City. While staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. On July 8, 1984, Menudo performed on the 2-hour CBS special Salute to Lady Liberty, performing Like a Cannonball, while staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip for filming. Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. On September 22, 1984, Menudo gave its debut benefit concert for UNICEF at Dar Constitution Hall in Washington, D.C. The Washington Post wrote that Diaz was sanguine about the reason for agreeing to become UNICEF's official singing group, quoting Diaz saying, "From the moment Menudo became an international phenomenon, we started looking at international organizations to team up with. UNICEF is the ideal. It is concerned with children's welfare, and Menudo is the symbol of childhood." Rossello then performed with Menudo at the UNICEF headquarters located at 3 United Nations Plaza, New York, New York. While staying at the hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. On September 29, 1984, Rossello performed with Menudo at the Beacon Theater in New York City. While staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. On November 17, 1984, Rossello performed with Menudo on the Solid Gold television program in New York City. While staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. On February 16, 1985, Rossello performed with Menudo again at the Palladium in New York City. While staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. In February 1985, Pepsi confirmed from its headquarters in Purchase, New York, that it had recently filmed a commercial with Menudo. During the filming of that commercial, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. On May 6, 1985, Rossello performed with Menudo on the Today Show in New York City. While staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello. In November 1985, Rossello performed with Menudo on The Ed Sullivan Show in New York City. While staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. On May 4th, 1986, Rossello performed with Menudo at the Felt Forum in Madison Square Garden in New York City. While staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. On July 4th, 1986, Rossello performed with Menudo at the Statue of Liberty in New York City for the statue's centennial celebration. While staying at a hotel in New York City during the trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. From 1983 through 1985, Menudo performed in a series of music spots that aired live on ABC during ABC's youth oriented Saturday morning programming block and on ABC's show rubric The Amazing Cube, filmed in New York City. While staying at a hotel in New York during each filming trip, Diaz forcibly raped Rossello and subjected him to crimes of gender motivated violence. Perhaps most egregiously, Diaz raped Rossello in New York City when Menudo traveled to New York City to film two separate scenes on season 16 of Sesame Street between 1984 to 1985. Rossello was forcibly raped and subjected to crimes of gender motivated violence by Diaz during the trip to film the popular children's television show. The rape and sexual abuses that Diaz subjected Rossello to in this jurisdiction were carried out because of Rossello's gender or on the basis of his gender and were due, at least in part, to an animus based on his gender. Diaz specifically targeted Rossello to carry out his abuse because Rossello was a young boy. The rape and sexual assault of Rossello were actions taken against him without his consent. Such sexual acts were a violation of Rossello's bodily autonomy and an expression of Diaz's contempt for that autonomy. It is apparent from the acts itself that Diaz acted with malice or ill will based on Rossello's gender. Rossello's life has been gravely affected by the horrific abuses that he endured for years at the hands of Diaz. In December 1986, Rossello witnessed Diaz engaging in inappropriate sexual contact with another young male. Shortly thereafter, and as a result of the perpetual violent sexual abuse, seeing no other way out of the band, Rossello attempted to take his own life. The next day, Rossello received a letter saying that he was no longer part of Menudo. To control the media, Diaz made public comments that Rossello's departure from the band was related to his inability to be controlled. Rossello has attempted suicide on more than one occasion as he has tried to live with the horrific abuse that he endured as a small child. There is no greater harm that can be done to a human being than the harm that Edgardo Diaz caused to Roy Rossello. Count 1. Violation of New York City Administrative Code against Edgardo Diaz. The plaintiff adopts and realleges paragraphs 1 through 88 above as if fully set forth in this count. Plaintiff further specifically reincorporates paragraphs 64 through 80 above as if fully set forth herein, describing the individual acts of rape and violent crimes motivated by gender that occurred within this jurisdiction. Diaz's constant rape and sexual abuse of Rossello was a violent crime motivated by gender within the meaning of the Victims of Gender Motivated Violence Protection Law. Diaz committed acts of gender motivated violence against Rossello when he raped him and subjected him to heinous acts of sexual abuse. The acts of gender motivated violence against Rossello were committed because of Rossello's gender or on the basis of his gender and were due, at least in part, to an animus based on his gender. Specifically, Diaz committed violent sexual crimes motivated by gender upon Rossello. Rossello was sexually abused by Diaz in New York City and specifically within Manhattan. At all relevant times, Diaz acted with reckless disregard for the safety of Rossello. As a result, Rossello alleges that one or more exemptions set forth in New York CPLR 1602 applies. As a direct and proximate result of Edgardo Diaz's violations of GMVA, Rossello has in the past suffered and in the future will continue to suffer physical injury, pain, emotional distress, psychological trauma, mental anguish, humiliation, embarrassment, loss of self esteem, loss of dignity, invasion of his privacy, and a loss of his capacity to enjoy life, as well as other damages. Rossello incurred medical and psychological expenses, and he will in the future suffer additional medical and psychological expenses. These injuries are permanent in nature, and Rossello will continue to suffer these losses in the future. This cause of action is timely under the GMVA because Diaz's crimes were motivated on the basis of Rossello's gender. Wherefore, plaintiff demands judgment against Edgardo Diaz for compensatory and general damages, punitive damages, attorney's fees, and such other and further relief as this court deems just and proper. Plaintiff hereby demands trial by jury on all issues triable as of a right by a jury. Jury demand. Plaintiff demands a trial by jury on all claims so triable. This was dated February 27th, 2025. Respectfully submitted by Edwards Henderson. Latest updates on Rossello versus Diaz. So, where does the Rossello versus Diaz case stand as of May 2025? The lawsuit was filed in May 2024, and there have been limited public updates since then. Based on available information, the case is still in the early stages, such as discovery or pretrial motions, as civil lawsuits can take months or even years to resolve. No trial date has been publicly reported, and it's unclear if Diaz has formally responded to the complaint. On the criminal side, the Los Angeles Police Department opened an investigation into Diaz in 2023 over Roy's allegations of the Biltmore Hotel assault. The case is under review by the LA County District Attorney's Office, but no charges have been filed as of now. Diaz, now 77, has consistently denied all allegations and has not been criminally charged in connection with any Menudo related claims. There is ongoing public support for Roy, with users praising his bravery and calling for justice for Menudo members. Roy's lawsuit is a significant step, but the road to justice is long. The case could set a precedent for other former Menudo members to come forward, and it keeps the spotlight on the broader issue of abuse in the entertainment industry. Roy Rossello's story is a stark reminder of the hidden costs of fame and the courage it takes to speak out against powerful figures. His lawsuit against Edgardo Diaz and his allegations against Jose Menendez have not only given him a platform to heal, but also to shed new light on the Menendez brothers' case, challenging us to rethink how we view victims of abuse. What do you think about Roy's case? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this deep dive helpful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with friends, and subscribe for more. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.